Okay, what we're looking at here is coming to be known as the Baka stone, or Baka Tablet. It was found in Baka, Bulgaria here recently. It's kind of a unique artifact, being in the fact that it has proto-linguistics on it that look like they're idiograms that lead to an idea of the earliest cartouches ideas, and also Sumerian idiograms, which led to their linguistics. And it may connect to both, or either, or neither. But it definitely looks like it hooks up to at least Sumerians, and people have noted that off the bat. But we've also made the connections of how that hooks up to Egypt. I don't know if it shows up in here very well, but on the left-hand side, about where the three lines are, pardon my finger coming in, where you see these three lines here, and then it comes up and goes on, all this side is dipped in a red ochre. It's even in the crevices and so on. And to me, that looks like a stamp. You can barely make it out, but on the far side there's an upside down pyramid or triangle shape with a line coming down out of it, or an upside down T. Or perhaps this is upside down and therefore it would be a pyramid with a line going above it, or a T. Because of its shape, it could have been something that impressed those earliest Chads that we've found back in the day that hook up to pottery. But strangely, this kind of hooks up to pre-pottery Neolithic B age. Predates a little over 7,000 years ago. Something like 5200 BC in a max, they're giving it at this point. Other than that symbol on the left, there's one on the right too. And then down this facing there is, and it looks like there's some type of symbol, and I wish they'd had somebody go through the deal where you run shadows over it and so on, can really see the look of it, and then give a descriptive printout on it, or when they take the picture and draw lines over the top of it. But there's a weird effect here with almost a wings and something going on here, standing on something. And that something seems to be a box, and it's cut into fours. And then down below you have a linguistics type of marks too. And again, it's reminds me of these early Sumerian linguistics, but it also with Egypt. And if someone was to read it from top to bottom, looking at it like this, you could think this could be a chieftain's mark on top, and he was the master of the four corners or four winds or something along that line. And then his sound of his name would be the next one down. This could be one side. This is palm sized, by the way, and it's bisque and made out of clay, and a clay tablet. So that kind of throws off this idea, whenever the pre-pottery Neolithic changes in, and here we go with pottery, all of a sudden we're finding pretty decent pottery. I always wondered back in school, and talked about it for a few times, a couple of guys that might be able to give me some insight. There wasn't much, but about how there really wasn't much fourth grader ashtrays made, where it just looks like here's some little junk and you're doing it. There's clay figurines, but that goes all the way up to a modern time, and people were doing that with shabdis and all this type of stuff, and they don't look fantastic. They're too small. At best, you're making a Ken doll type of thing that's smaller than that. Not like the old G.I. Joe, but the new G.I. Joe little one. But this red ochre on the end of it here could be a stamp in some way. In fact, there's a lot of people, myself included, that believe that there was a lot of writing before there was writing on clay and things and stone that we find now, and the reason it's gone is because it was on bark and on skins and so on. And that red ochre symbol with a rounded edge there and cut in parts, if you were to dip that in red ochre and then smush it onto something, whether you were making a chad or maybe a skin, it would leave an impression where it left a blotch, but then what's carved out of it would not be there, and leaving a symbol. There's one on the right too, which has a circular form that's to, it has this line down, but then it has a circular form that's to it, and then there's another symbol inside of that that could have been used. But there's no real sign of red ochre, which I hope is showing up on the other side, which looks like it was dipped. And of course we're going back to red ochre people and so on. So this could make connections with a few different things that we've talked about here. I think it's kind of odd though that it seems to be a fired bisque tablet. I've said before, maybe long ago in a video, that I thought that what happened here was that people were not making fired bricks, they were making sun-dried bricks at first, and then somebody used them around the fire that were fairly fresh, and after cooking in the fire and doing so, and then breaking that down and perhaps using some to rebuild, once that started eroded, which happened frequently, especially with a lot of rain that they used to have in these areas that's no longer there anymore, that they noticed that these brick kind of things, well, what was that? And it's just a way of looking at, like, how did they find out what's the little thing that clicked off the little thing? But of course I had that idea with Sumerian farmers and stuff, and that's been blown out of the water for a while. So you think somebody did something like this, and then to let it dry so it could become usable, which they already found out that clay could dry and become usable. They maybe set it around a fire, and instead of letting it dry for a few hours, they let it dry overnight as the fire kept going, and one of those sticks was right up under that edge, and as it burnt over and got it up under it, cooked it a little bit extra, and the wind was blowing that way too, and so on, and it kind of did that extra bisque thing where this thing was able to be survived until now. Because if it was just a sun-dried type thing or regular clay, it really wouldn't show any of the markings almost anymore. It would be eroded back into the land pretty much. You can see how it's got all these gray inclusions all over it, and there's some pitting that's all over it where those have already washed out and so on, and so that's the inclusions that are in this clay that this is made out of. Made videos recently, well, not real recently, about magic and things and what was magic, and people knew things, and when they showed up to other people that didn't know it, it was incredible. It was magic. Understand that if you could take mud and then just mush it around and make something out of it and set it out here in the sun for a while, and all of a sudden, ting, 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 that's stone now. That's mud to stone. Like in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff I talk about, that's one of the little things they can do. Mud to stone or stone to mud. It becomes hard to find a use for it and stuff, but then again, you think back to ideas like this. And the concrete's the same idea, by the way, where you just make up a slurry of this stuff, and if done right, then you just set it out there, and that thing can turn into a hard as stone. Harder than a lot of stones. If done exactly right, it can last for many, many thousands of years. But this being about 7,070 7,200 years ago at 5,200 BC is kind of leading into the time of the pre-proto cultures of the Sumerians. And now we have that connective that's there, that there was always these missing gaps and these lords of Arata and these things that were talked about from the way back. It seemed to come into play more, and the idea of genetics, linguistics, and so on, showing these people that were up around the Black Sea and all of this spread out, that we've hooked up with the Vinca and Yamnaya cultures and so on, that this might be connected with. And it also might be connected with Egypt as well as Sumeria. Some kind of in-between artifact. They claim here that it's the earliest writing, perhaps, that we have of anything, because it's not just a couple of symbols, which is, of course, writing. But in the definition of modern day, to be able to go through a phrase and so on, rather than just a few symbols, although it would effectively be extremely broken English, looking at anything like this. And through a lot, adjectives and all kinds of things aren't really put in a lot of linguistics until much later. And this doesn't necessarily seem phonetic, other than the name down there, which could be symbols for whole groups of sounds. And by doing so, it would invoke a name or the essence of a person's name, to where you could go, oh, okay, to someone back then, well over 7,000 years ago. I think it's amazing we find artifacts like this, but there are pieces that are missing in this puzzle that's a 3D puzzle, because it's not only just the puzzle where pieces are missing all over the place at all times through the epochs, but it 3D goes through time. And so slowly but surely we're filling in this 3D and these connectives, but each layer has puzzle pieces that are missing and probably will never be filled back in. Indeed, this is probably 2 steps away from us being able to figure it out and what they really meant. And so we'd have to have some type of Rosetta Stone. And while a couple of symbols look Sumerian, or pre-proto ideogramic, it ends up being to where we'd have to find a Rosetta Stone type thing that would make connectives that we could understand what that was done or what was said that was in it. But I, and a lot of people that have looked at the information, believe Kamyana Mohyla may be the earliest so far that we've found, and it's possible the scratching and scratch writing there, that's a linear scratch writing, along with symbols, dating back to 22,000 BC is probably the earliest. It's been over 3 years since I've done one of Kamyana Mohyla. It's spelled Kamyana Mohyla. You can look in my videos right now and then go to it. It's well, I wasn't making great videos back then, and the presentation that I'm double recording it off of isn't that fantastic, but it's a Russian guy, or people that were working in Russia and giving a presentation there in English, but he shows you where linguistics guys have figured out the scratch writing, at least to vowels and consonants and so on, and it seems to have something to do with Sumerians, for they appear to be talking about Utu when they're talking about the sun, and Inanna, which may be Venus, and that Venus figurine, but also may already be the star that's in the sky, And apparently this thing that's written on the wall is that when something's going on, that with these dots that are on the wall seem to be perhaps zodiacal and a time of the year that a certain sacrifice is made, and this guy came up with the idea that it's for goats or rams, it looks like they would be talking about. I don't know. Some of that seems like a real stretch, but some of it seems pretty real. And this thing was flooded under, and when they got down to the level where they were seeing all this stuff on the wall, well, there was stuff above it and below, but radiocarbon dating sets it at 22,000 BC, and there's a mammoth and so on. But then they saw that scratch writing, and people started figuring that out, and then they tried to change it and say, no, that's probably a bull, and this is probably only about 9,000, and wow, yeah, this is maybe proto. No, it's like we've already been there. We just went down to the levels. The only problem is against the wall over here, which has been buried the whole time, is something that's showing you that, yeah, and there's a mammoth. So it kind of goes past that point, and people didn't like that. I'll do another video about that soon, but I probably won't show the other guy's video presentation on it, so you may want to look at that one that I just talked about there. But again, this is pretty exciting here. A tablet, a clay tablet, a hand palm size clay tablet that apparently was used for some type of seal things, and then it's got red ochre on the end of it, making all kinds of connections there, and how it would be used as perhaps a stamp. Some chieftain or something on there. Who will let someone may figure it out one day, but who will ever know, really? Let me know what y'all think. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.